Welcome to Poleshift News and the Mavstar Observatory. Guys, it's time we open the debate on this and go into the topic of the greenhouse gases, because there is a big misunderstanding, and done deliberately as well, because they don't want to address the specifics of greenhouse gases. They want to mention a few of the greenhouse gases that can contribute to what they call the greenhouse effect, and as a result, mislead the public. I hope that by the end of this video, we give you some ammunition that if ever the topic of greenhouse gases comes up, you'll remember one thing about the greenhouse gases, and it should win that argument for you and set the record straight. There are some scientists that come out with some ridiculous things, and they know better. They really know better, but they carry on. And I think the reason for this is they wouldn't have the job simply if they went against the grain. So we're going to get into this, but before we do, I want to thank those people that are supporting the observatory. We've had a low month this month, with the level of support, but there has been always a few individuals that have carried the weight of a lot of other people, and I'm not going to just give them a little shout out, because I do think it's worth the shout out for these guys and all the patrons and all the other people that support on PayPal. But I just want to say, Douglas, kudos to you. Brad, kudos. Israel, you're a regular supporter as well, and a lot of others are as well. But these few individuals every single week, put up a reasonable or a substantial amount of money. I believe that even one of these people threw a Poleshift party in order to raise some money for the observatory, and that is just going beyond, I think, the call of anything else. It's just an amazing effort. So big thank you to not just the people I've mentioned, because there is a list of people, and I could be here for quite some time if I mentioned everyone that supported the channel over the period of a couple of years. But big thanks to all of you guys. This observatory really does need the funding to keep going and do what we do, and at the end of the day, we're sharing the truth and we're sharing data that's unobtainable anywhere else. So I won't say any more other than the fact that there is some links down there in the description if you want to support us on PayPal or on Patreon. Okay, let's get into this. Right, as you can see, what are the types of greenhouse gases? And they mention a few of these greenhouse gases. As you can see, there is about 9 greenhouse gases mentioned, but really the true greenhouse gases are the trimolecules. And CO2 is a trimolecule. It's carbon atom with 2 oxygen atoms attached to it via a double bond, and it's got that double bond because carbon has a valency of 4. Now, I'm not going to bore you guys with the valencies and the amount of bonds that it's got or active regions on its atom. That's why it attracts these. I'm just going to tell you why they interact in our atmosphere with inbound solar radiation. When it hits it, what actually happens. So most real greenhouse gases are trimolecules, such as the CO2 one. Another one there is NO2, nitrous oxide. The other ones that are mentioned, such as nitrogen trifluoride, sulfur hexafluoride, etc., are not really true greenhouse gases, because they are made up of more than 3 molecules in their structure. But one of the main contributions to this greenhouse effect that we suffer from is water. And as you can see there in that little paragraph, water is the most abundant greenhouse gas, but most scientists believe that water vapour produced directly by human activity contributes very little to the amount of water vapour in the atmosphere. Just think about that, guys. Just think about that paragraph of what somebody's added in there and the reason why they would add that in there. First of all, we live in a biosphere, and that is regulated by gravity, and that's why we hold on to most of the water in our atmosphere. Secondly, the atmosphere where this water is in abundance, and it is one of the major contributors to the greenhouse effect, which is hardly ever mentioned, because there is way more water vapour in our atmosphere than there is CO2, but it's very rarely mentioned, and it's very rare, and it's always downplayed in this same way, you know, oh, but humans adding extra water to the atmosphere contributes very little, so therefore they don't even count it in their inventories. It's absolutely ridiculous. But more importantly, as a direct result of more cosmic radiation, and as you can see in the other part of that paragraph where it's talking about ozones, and we was talking about this in the video yesterday, you know, those aerosols in the ozone area are being attached by the cosmic particles, and therefore the particles are getting to a certain size where water vapour can condense on them. It's then being transported by the by the polar jet streams into the subtropical jet streams, and that's where we're getting most of our problems with cloud coverage, lack of sun, affecting the seasons for growing. And some of you guys in the video yesterday was talking about, you know, just simple growing tomato plants and how much you've struggled this year. You know, this is the sort of thing that we notice when we don't get standard seasons, and it was only about 15-20 years ago we was having regular standard seasons and good summers, even here in the UK. You know, yesterday it was 30 degrees, but in the shade it felt freezing cold, and that is because, you know, in our upper atmosphere we've got ice crystals, and that's why we're getting those prismatic effects, you know, at sunrise and at sunset, called sundogs. But you know what regulates the water in our atmosphere is the magnetosphere, and that is being directly affected by the magnetic pole shift. So all this, guys, plays into effect. But you know, I think we've already popped the bubble on CO2, because CO2 is rising but temperatures aren't. You know, temperatures are coming down and CO2 is still going up, and we know that CO2 is not really having an effect on this world like is being described. Now, they don't use the term global warming so much. What they use is climate change, and that's because they can't predict the weather even anymore, and they are taking a safety precaution, because, you know, if it continues to cool down and more people realise it, then they cannot put the carbon tax on industries and even on ourselves as much as they are, because we are all being taxed a hell of a lot of money. They have destroyed industries through trying to control the amount of CO2 that we put out there, and now we've even got people, even in the UK, protesting to the government that they want to reduce carbon emissions to zero by 2025. Is that? It's absolutely ridiculous. What are you going to do about the real major problem that is causing these effects? If you want to address greenhouse gases, then you have got to go after the biggest, corporate in this case, and that is water vapour in our atmosphere. And there's very little you can do about it. You can't stop the sun being in a low output phase, and has been for the last 33 years. You can't stop that, because that will allow more cosmic radiation in, and in turn it will allow more water vapour into our atmosphere. And you cannot stop the Earth going for a magnetic reversal, even if it's an excursion event. I always have to throw that in there, because people say, Gene, you know, it could be an excursion. Well, it doesn't really make any difference, and these people that are talking about these excursions know that very well, because even in a magnetic excursion, when it reaches equilibrium, if it's between 12 to 14,000 years before it goes back to its original position, the poles, they will at the equilibrium at 6,000 years, we will see, you know, the magnetosphere drop considerably, and that will just allow more water vapour in. That will destroy more crops around this world, and at a time where there has never been so many people on this planet. We've got 8 billion souls on this planet, or probably even more, and we have to struggle now to feed them. If we keep putting pressure on the farmers, on the arable land that is capable of growing land, then it is only going to make matters worse. You know, your food prices are already going up as a direct result of the climate that has been affected with regards to the amount of water vapour in the atmosphere. Let's call it for what it is. It is the water vapour that is causing the majority of the problems around the world. It is the water vapour that is causing the jet streams to widen and take on more water and therefore be more sluggish, and then stretch right the way down from the polar jet streams to the subtropical jet streams, and then deliver that water either as, precipitate in liquid water or over in the northern regions as snow and ice. Let's call it for what it is. The problem we face is an increase in water vapour in our atmosphere, and that is what's causing the crops to fail. That is what's causing, some places to have droughts, because when the water gets into the jet stream, it ladens the troughs and peaks of the jet stream, and that's why, some regions aren't getting the water that they used to in the given seasons that they were supposed to get it, and vice versa. Floods, droughts, and other weather anomalies as a result of warm and cold air mixing. It's all to do with, if you want to go up the chain, water, the poles reversing on the planet, the magnetosphere weakening, and then in turn the sun going through a low solar cycle. We face some really, really difficult times, guys, ahead, and for the short term it doesn't seem like anything at this moment has reached any equilibrium, and we're not even halfway through what is about to come. In fact, when we get into those weak field lines and that pole begins to shift over that 40 degrees, these problems could exponentially increase and get much worse. The weather isn't predictable now. It's going to get even less predictable in the future. And like I say, we have never been so heavily dependent on technology, and we have never been so heavily dependent on producing so much food for the 8 billion souls that are already on this planet. What we need is some more honest scientists to stop writing such articles as this, completely covering up the fact that one of the main contributors to these problems is water vapour, and regardless of whether humans are putting it into the atmosphere or nature's putting it into the atmosphere, which is much, much worse than what humans is, but you've still got to, if you're a scientist, you've still got to categorise the problems as they are, and what should be at the top of that list is not coincidentally CO2 or carbon dioxide. It should be water, and they should make it clear why these molecules are considered greenhouse gases because of their molecular makeup. This is exactly what is going on across the range, and this is why so many people are confused and can't even enter the argument because they're just not educated enough on these simple things to know how to win that argument. I helped a guy with a case against Monsanto, and they was talking about their buffer regions around fields. They were saying, if you're not going to use our seeds and you don't want to get into any trouble with us taking you to court, and you're possibly losing your farm as a result of our seeds migrating into your field, then you better put these buffer barriers around your field so that you've got like probably 20-30 foot of area that isn't being used for agricultural purpose, even if it's in your property. What they're saying is you can't have that. Now, can you imagine if you've got a large holding, how much 20-30 foot of the perimeter would lose you in crops to start with? But this is what they're expecting you to do, because they don't want their genetically modified crops ending up in your field. But what they what they fail to realise is that wind can blow the pollination across just that distance. And I was saying to this guy, when you start looking at the core samples, even in the Arctic regions, we find pollen from all over the world. There's the reality of their buffer fields. It's just bad science. They don't really care, and there's just too much of this going on from these large corporations, and it's a shame that some good scientists are just too frightened to speak up about it because they're going to lose the paycheck. That's the reality we're facing, and as long as people are going to keep putting their conscience in the closet, nothing's going to change on the ground level where we are, guys. it's just going to continuously get worse and worse because they're not addressing the problems. Even if they can do something with it, they're not looking into that possibility of doing something, and as a result it will affect us all, even those that own these corporations eventually. So it is ridiculous. You know, we are supposed to be the main stewards on this planet that take care of everything else because of our intelligence, and here we are completely denying the fact that we are intelligent, we got the answers, and yet we still choose to, you know, lock them away in a closet just so that we can earn some money. It's got to change, guys. I'm going to say what I usually do, guys. You know, I wasn't planning on doing a video, but you know, I was thinking about this topic quite a lot yesterday, and I thought, you know, we really need to cover the topic of greenhouse gases and what are the main contributors and how they affect our planet, and that's why I did it today. So, you know, but I'll say what I usually do. If you want to support what we do on the Maverick Star Observatory and the Pole Shift News and on this YouTube channel, then, you know, there's a PayPal link there, and there's also the Patreon link. And I'll say what I usually do. You have a great weekend, guys. I'm going to catch up with you at some point in the week, hopefully with some updates on to with regards to some more data, hopefully, that we've had come from one of the 6 magnetometers, or a progress report on the cloud generator. We'll see. And yeah, enjoy the weekend. Bye for now.